interrupt this program to bring you a special bulletin.
All right, we're back with another broadcast interruption. Last time it was Bryce and I venting about The Acolyte, which I didn't even finish. I ended up canceling Disney Plus before I could even get to the end of it. So
my man's rage quit.
And it wasn't just that; it was an expense that needed to be cut at that point. So
sure it was, Tim. That's what you'll keep telling us.
Yep. If we were going to be honest, my mom was paying for Disney Plus and she was done paying for it. So I just said, yeah, it's not worth making up the bill.
Tough but fair.
Yep. But we're back. We're talking Rings of Power Season 2. Lord of the Rings is something that I'm pretty sure holds a special place for all of us.
As I sit here in my Lord of the Rings themed office with the movie posters on one wall and a map of Middle-earth on the other.
Yes, it's to varying levels with each of us. I know my earliest memory is actually sitting on my mother's lap while she read The Hobbit to me. So, and I distinctly remember the Eagles. You know, that is my earliest memory of childhood. And then I know Caleb.
Core memory.
Well, exactly. It's great. Caleb, you recently took a trip.
Yes, I did. I went to Middle-earth for 15 days. And it was maybe the greatest thing that I've done in my life so far.
I believe it.
It was amazing to witness, flying over the Misty Mountains and walking through the forest of Lothlorien, and it was just all amazing.
Did you just have Howard Shore's soundtrack playing, like when you traveled from destination to destination?
Pretty much. That was the soundtrack to the trip.
It's like anytime you fast travel in the show, they always have a great musical ballad moment, and you got to have that when you're flying over the Misty Mountains.
For sure.
All right. Bryce, do you have Lord of the Rings stories that you want to intro with?
No, this is the time to let everyone know that I am the more casual Lord of the Rings fan. I actually grew up on the Harry Potter movies, so I did watch Lord of the Rings. I just don't remember them nearly as well, especially because my mom would always tell me to get out of the room during the war sequences. So that's how young I was when I was first introduced to it. So I grew up on the Harry Potter movies, came back to Lord of the Rings kind of later, and honestly became a bigger fan once I actually met you two and started rewatching the movies, especially doing the marathons that you guys had. So as a movie lover, I think that Lord of the Rings is arguably the greatest series of movies ever made. Honestly, it's hard to debate otherwise. You can maybe say Godfather, but even Godfather Part 3 falls short of the fantastical third movie that is Return of the King. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the movies. I think they're amazing, and what Peter Jackson did with those movies is just like a standard that has yet to been reached. Maybe Dune is the next best thing that I can think of that's coming pretty close to it. So we'll see what happens there.
I don't think we will ever have a trilogy that reaches what Peter Jackson was able to do again. And if we do, it's 20 years down the road. It's not in currently.
Yeah,
it's not.
And
not
also,
in the
if we do, lucky us.
Yes, exactly. I'm telling you guys, we are
our
sleeping
lifetime
on the Dune movies.
I mean, they've been making movies for 100 years at this point.
100
the fact
years.
that we got the best one when we were in our formative years. If we can get another one that's that good again in our lifetime, lucky us.
Dying happy.
You're sleeping on the Dune movies, okay? Dune's, if they hit this third movie, I'm telling you, we have the next one. This is it. I'm telling you.
It's good.
I'm much more in love with these movies than you guys are. We've talked about it.
Yep. So we're not going to debate Dune versus Lord of the Rings. We're going to talk Rings of Power, but we're coming at you. We have the more casual and Bryce. Me, I grew up reading the books. I've read the core trilogy in The Hobbit multiple times, but then we have Caleb, who is our deep lore expert, knows far more than the two of us combined. So we're taking a look at Rings of Power. We're going to break it down scene by scene, what we like, what we didn't like, and try to give you a fair opinion of what's happening, what we think so far. So, diving into episode 1. It opens with a flashback to, which isn't super clear, but opens with a flashback to the dawn of the Second Age, where young Sauron, who I at first fully believed was an impersonator because it is a different actor.
Yep. Katie had the same reaction. She was like, wait, that's...
Yep.
Wait.
I was like, this guy's faking it. Where young Sauron, who happens to look older than later Sauron, but anyways, here he's played by Slow Horses actor Jack Lowden. I don't know if anybody's seen that. But he's attempting to assume control over the orcs. However, they are unimpressed by his statement that many orcs will die in the pursuit of forging a new and perfect order to heal Middle-earth. As Adar crowns Sauron, he flips the crown over, which when he was holding it up, I was like, that actually looks very stabby. And I happened to think that right before he flipped it over to do this.
Pointy everywhere.
I was like, that's a very stabby crown. Stabs him with the headpiece, using it as a weapon. A fight breaks out where the orcs kill Sauron. And Adar then assumes control. We get this, as he's dying, we get this brilliant flash of light. Whoosh, and then his physical body melts into the ground. We get what I assume is a significant period of time passing. The camera pans out nicely. We get a lit cave underneath, pans out, and then it comes back in. And I assume that was the passing of years. It doesn't say again, but that's what I picked up on. And then we get a cutscene from the first Venom movie that explains how the symbiote arrived to where we know it today. So this is Lord of the Rings, and it's not that easy to kill Sauron off. So his spirit escapes, and his spirit looks like the symbiote Venom and begins feeding off of living beings. It starts with a rat in the cave, and then he gradually consumes more and more until he consumes a woman that just happens to be driving by. The good news is he let the horse go. So the animal is free to move on. We're just getting rid of humans.
We don't have to report anything on doesthedogdie.com.
Yes, exactly. There's good news. No dogs were killed while Sauron was regaining his physical form. Just rats. There was something else.
Millipede, or like a centipede.
Oh, yeah, gross. Yep, bugs. Kill all those you want. Bad. Yeah. And then a woman. And then he comes out a man. So we get that flashback, and when he is reformed, he is now the Sauron we recognize from season 1. So
Halbrand,
yes. So he's stumbling through after this event, traveling through Middle-earth, where he stumbles across his band walking, and a man warns him that orcs are attacking men. Sauron questions the man about the shield he's wearing, which is a symbol of kings long dead. Later on, a boat with the group, he leaves the man to die as it crashes. He takes the shield, and this is where he's on the boat, gets broken apart, and this is where we meet him in season 1, basically. He's floating with a couple other survivors on the wreckage of this. This is our opening. It's about 15-ish, 20-ish minutes long. I actually enjoyed it, other than the symbiote stuff. I think disembodied spirit, I know Caleb and I actually texted about this earlier, but the symbiote thing is fine. I'm not that upset about it, but it's kind of hokey. It is just kind of hokey that he is this goo that has to travel across Earth in the meantime. Like, he's basically powerless until he can consume enough rats to stand up. I did think it looked good. I thought it looked pretty good. I actually really liked how it kind of starts to take human form before it's close to being there. I'm a little annoyed at that conversation with the man with the symbol. And I'm annoyed because season 1 spent so much time talking about this symbol and basically misleading us on who Halbrand was, for him to be like, oh, I just got it off this guy and it means nothing now. So gone. You're not going to hear about it again for the rest of this season. But that's where it's from. So while it filled in a gap from season 1, it's also like, wow, you just focused so much time in season 1 on that to write it out at the beginning of season 2. So that's my thoughts on the opening. I actually really like the actor who plays Halbrand. I actually really like him. I think he's good. But that's my thoughts on the opening. No other thoughts on opening?
Okay, I have 3 thoughts on the opening.
Okay.
Number 1, the very first shot that we see, it's like a black and it fades in with an orc walking in carrying the crown. What I'm interested to see, I don't know if they're actually trying to do this or if this is something completely different. The crown that Morgoth wore when he was being the Dark Lord trying to take over the world was called the Iron Crown. And it was a big deal when he stole the Silmarils from Feanor. We're going real deep and nerdy here.
I'm following. I follow.
He had slots essentially in the Iron Crown that he placed the Silmarils in, so he always wore them on his brow. All that to say, I don't know if they're trying to be like, oh, it's the Iron Crown, like it's back, or if it's like, oh, it's a different Iron Crown, because it's a crown and it looks like it's made of iron. So I'm interested to see if that is what they're doing with this, and like just a fun nerdy deep dive of like, oh, is it the Iron Crown or is it just an Iron Crown?
Okay.
My second comment was kind of what you said. I wrote down, why is Sauron worms?
Yeah.
He was just an anthropomorphic clump of worms, and I didn't love it. Katie said she kind of liked it because it's different. Like it's so.
If you guys listen closely enough in the cave section, you can actually hear slightly in the echoes Eminem singing in the background.
The Venom song
devours the rat.
And then my only other comment was all of these refugees that are getting chased away from their homes by orcs are going across the sea. Where are they going?
Yeah.
Like,
good question.
Maybe they heard about Numenor and they're like, maybe they'll take us in. Numenor isn't really known for being great about letting foreigners into their lands, but like that was my best guess. But I was kind of like, oh, we heard that there's places across the sea. Like, where?
Yeah. Let me tell you, Numenor in this show seems super friendly and like a place that people can definitely just come in and out of totally free will whenever they want.
Yeah.
So that's definitely, when we get to episode 3, I'll tell you what I think of Numenor.
Yeah. All right, that's all I got for the opening.
Bryce, underwhelmed, overwhelmed, meh.
I will try to keep it episode specific and have bigger thoughts overall that definitely repeat through every episode for me. And for context, even though I am definitely the least qualified to maybe talk Lord of the Rings, I do try to do as much research as I can to know what's book related or like related to the lore compared to what's like new ideas that they're throwing in, just to have like an idea of what I'm actually talking about. So, because a lot of my notes will say like, I don't know if this is lore accurate, but it feels kind of weird or it doesn't feel like it fits the story. So just
bring it up. Let's have that talk.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That's kind of more. So I'm just going to point this one out right away. And this one will be for every episode, but I just wanted to point it out because it stuck out. Whoever decided to do the lighting for the dark scenes in this show needs to just like either go back to school for lighting or we need to get someone new in there. I swear to you, I could not see a single thing happening in any scene where it was supposed to be dark. And like I had the blinds closed. There was not light really coming in. And like I'm squinting at the TV, just trying to see what's going on, who's talking. And it only gets worse as the show goes on. But that was the very first thing. I just feel like I had to get that off my chest. It was really bad.
No, I agree with you on that because I had to. The first time I watched it, I couldn't tell any of the Venom movement stuff was happening.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the. And I'm not gonna beat on it because you guys already beat that horse.
No, it was so dark.
The Venom stuff. This was one of those moments where I was looking at some of the lore and what it actually spoke of because I know that Sauron's supposed to be like just kind of this. He's not a physical being per se. He's more of like this evil spirit from what I've read up or watched online. But I remember someone specifically saying like, I know what they were going for, but the thing is, like, Sauron is more of a spirit than he is like a big goop, and so while I see what they were going for with the goop thing, like, I agree with you. I think it was kind of weird to go with that rather than just this like more of a spirit of, an evil deity. It's something it was more of the execution of it I didn't care for. Like, I'm hit or miss, but you guys already hit on that.
It made me have questions about how we get to an eye.
Right. Yeah. For the most part, it was like whatever, but
he can be I'm not gonna, or an eyeball, either one.
It just looks, yeah, exactly. It just looks weird. I didn't like it, but it's not something I'm gonna like harp on like some other things. I didn't really care for the opening section. I felt it was kind of useless overall, especially the sequence. Caleb kind of touched on it. The sequence with the foreigners, moving. Something that really irked me about that sequence overall was the way I know Sauron. We're talking like top 10, top 5 villains of all time, like big baddie, like the most evil of evil dudes. Like, dude just likes to, kill and do bad things. And it almost felt like they were trying to almost build this backstory of a guy who meant well a little bit, or almost make you like sympathize with him. And again, we're only in season 2. We got 5 seasons to go through. I don't know what they're going to do. But something about that sequence just kind of irked me a little bit, that they would even entertain the idea of like, possibly sympathizing with them. Maybe I read too much into it, but it was just more the way they were trying to execute it. That was just like, something about that just irked me a little bit of just like, why can't we just have bad guys? Like, if Master Manipulator, that's fine. That's a lot different. But like, the way it was just executed made it feel like it was like we're trying to build him out and flesh him out more of like, he had a choice to make good decisions and whatnot. It's like, everything I know of this dude is he's just bad. So that's just something that stood out to me. You guys can correct me if that's something that I just don't know about.
I'm not going to jump on you and correct you, but I am going to say I actually thought this opening did the reverse of what you picked up on. So I felt all of season 1. Afterwards. I felt all of season 1 they were trying to make him this sympathetic character.
Gotcha.
They kind of were. Where we weren't even sure if he was the big bad until we had good ideas, but they, kind of making him like, was he on this redemptive path?
Right.
And then I felt like this opening showed us that nope, he's the master manipulator from the second he regains physical form.
Which is what they do for the rest of the episodes moving forward. But that goes back to my point of, I don't understand what the point of this opening segment was. Like, that was like a 20-minute opening segment
it was retconning. It was retconning sympathetic Sauron from season 1 is what this
possibly, but even then it didn't. It felt useless to me. I just didn't think it was necessary for the show. But for most people, it was their favorite part of episode 1. So I'm not gonna crucify anyone for liking it, I guess. Another one of my notes I wrote was just what I felt was awful writing, and I'll get more into it in other episodes too. But specifically, there was one line. Where it was the Elf King or whatever his name was.
Gil-galad.
Yeah. He had a line where he was talking about the rings. They were talking about the rings. It was actually one that was leaked before the show was released. But he had the line of, it's a risk we must not chance to take, or something like that. And that's going to be something that I feel reflects in the rest of the episodes, where the writing, it just kind of feels like a high schooler tried to write what they think a medieval person sounds like, and it's just a bunch of like words basically switched around, kind of like Yoda talks, or it's just a bunch of metaphors constantly being thrown out every other sentence, and it just kind of, it sticks out for me, and it just kind of takes me out of it a little bit. Just feels like inexperienced writing from people who don't take the time to make sure that the conversations flow naturally. Instead, it's just a lot of metaphors being thrown around for every response to whatever they're saying at that point. So that stuck out a little bit. Green screen honestly looks rough for most of the first episode.
You're a little ahead of us, Bryce. We were just doing the opening thing. We
I
haven't
know.
gotten to
We're still on the first
just
I
on through here.
I made a list. I'm trying not to get into all of it, but yeah, if we're just in the opening sequence still, then yes, I overall just thought it was rough.
We're
Okay.
20 minutes into our half-hour podcast, and we're through the opening sequence, so we should probably move on.
Agreed.
So, with the flashback over, we catch up with the elves following the conclusion of season 1. So, Galadriel is summoned to see the High King Gil-galad. She's pretty desperate to discuss the rings, but Gil-galad questions her about Halbrand, asking if it's true that she did not share his actual identity with him. Galadriel...
It's happening right behind you right now.
Oh, yeah, it is. Galadriel informs him that she was deceived and that Halbrand is actually Sauron, much to Elrond's disappointment. They then argue over the rings as Elrond believes they may have been corrupted by Sauron, whereas Galadriel claims he didn't touch them. Gil-galad, though, says the rings may be the last hope for all of Middle-earth, so demands that Elrond gives them to him. However, refusing to do so, Elrond jumps off the cliff into the water with the rings. So it's very abrupt. This is a scene that I feel like this conversation has more depth and weight to it than is here on screen. It moves pretty quickly. And so this is one where I'm with you on some of the writing, Bryce, and I have my thoughts especially later about that. But this is one that it's just like Gil-galad changes his mind in 10 seconds. You know, that's how it feels in the scene.
Happens a lot in this show.
And I don't necessarily like, and I don't know if this is lore accurate, so you can help me out more here. I don't necessarily like the fact that Galadriel is complicit in this show. I don't like the fact that she basically aided Sauron in getting rings to the elves. I'm not a big fan of that. However, I will say I did notice a change in Galadriel this early in season 1. She is far less angry and kind of... How would you have described her in season 1? She's more approachable in this season. She seems more like the Galadriel that I would recognize from Lord of the Rings stories than she did in the first season, where even though she was thousands of years old, she was still kind of chip on her shoulder, trying to prove whatever in season 1. And this one seems a little bit more refined, polished, and I like that about it. I don't like this scene making Galadriel complicit. But then,
Yeah, this is one of many areas where when the writers decided to make this show, they were like, we need Elrond, we need Galadriel, we need characters that people know. We can't just go with all these new characters that Lord of the Rings casuals like Bryce have never heard of before. Like, you can't just have Gil-galad and Celebrimbor and like you got to have your Elrond and your Galadriel. The problem is in the actual lore, pretty much the entire story of the Rings of Power, it takes place between Sauron and Celebrimbor. Like, Galadriel is never mentioned as having any involvement in that process. Elrond is never mentioned having any involvement in that process. We're told who gets the rings once they're created and everything. But I think that's where you're struggling, Tim, with like Galadriel, this character that we know, being complicit in the creation of these rings. Like, it might feel wrong because that is completely fabricated by the writers of this show, and everything that they're doing, like, and it doesn't say in the lore that Galadriel wasn't involved. She just isn't mentioned.
Yeah.
So like it never explicitly says these people were not involved, but it is never explicitly said that they were involved. So that's the tricky part of intertwining these characters into a story where they don't really have a place in the lore.
Yeah, which is interesting because I actually think Elrond is one of the best characters in the show. Elrond, I still really like Elrond through
Real
this.
quick,
So,
before we get any further, I did want to comment. There are going to be several times where I think all of us are going to comment on how visually beautiful the show is at times. The first time in season 2 that I had that thought was the horse chase when they're riding into Lindon and like Galadriel's chasing Elrond on the horse trying to get the rings or whatever. That was the first sequence where I was like, wow, that looks really good.
I thought it looked really good. I do like Bryce brought up the green screen. I think there are a couple moments like when they're standing on this cliff that I can definitely see that. But for the most part, like I thought the opening in the mountains is clear they shot most of this outside. And it looks pretty good. I appreciate that. I think the set designs and stuff are still really fantastic. But one of the things I noticed during that scene is it looks like fall.
Yes.
There's leaves falling. And I didn't put this together because I'm just kind of casually viewing it the first time I heard someone else talk about it. But kind of the idea that the forest is mirroring what's happening to the tree. Yep. And so that tree is dying, and so all the other trees are dying too. And I was like, that's actually
it's appearing to be the autumn of the elves. And so the area around Lindon is like aging in the same way the elves are.
I thought that was a very subtle, really cool way to do that. Mm-hmm. So meanwhile, we're back at Mordor. Sauron who's posing as Halbrand now. Did I skip a scene? Nope.
No, you're good.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Both threatens Adar and offers, or Adar, however you want to say, offers to help him discover a sorcerer Galadriel's working with to forge a new weapon. So Adar does not recognize the new form of Sauron. Adar, however, doesn't have time for any of the tricks, stating Sauron is dead, and chains Halbrand up. Later that night, after he is attacked by Adar's followers, Halbrand enchants one of the wolves, wargs. Is that an early warg?
I think it's an early warg, yeah.
Yeah. It's a little small compared to what we see later. But
right.
He also, once again, speaks to Adar, promising to seek Sauron out, and is forced to pledge allegiance to the orc ruler. I really liked what they did in this scene, even if the scene itself is just fine. They strike a deal with Adar releasing Halbrand to find Sauron, asking the orcs to follow him every step. But he has Halbrand's head to the ground, and Halbrand says he will pledge. Is it pledge? He pledges himself to the Lord of Mordor.
I will serve the Lord of Mordor to the end of my days and his.
And then he smirks to the camera, and I'm actually totally fine with it. I thought it was pretty cool. Yep. I'm like, yeah, that was awesome.
I was not mad about that.
So the rest of that scene, though, meh. It's a bunch of whatever. We then catch up with the stranger. Oh, did you have something?
I did.
Okay.
In season 1, Adar was probably my favorite character.
Really?
Due in part to the character, due quite a bit to the performance of Joseph Mall. He was so good in that role. He had this way of delivering his lines and like his movement and everything whenever he was talking to somebody, even if he was looking at one of his fellow actors, it was almost like he was looking through them. Mm-hmm. I absolutely loved his performance. I thought he brought just an it factor to that was just so cool. I haven't been able to find anything as to why he did not come back for season 2. He was replaced by Sam Hazeldine. We got about 10 seconds into that first scene where he's sitting on the throne or whatever, and he's starting to interact with Halbrand, and I was like, I don't like him. I don't like him as much. And I I don't know if it's necessarily anything against Sam Hazeldine. I just thought Joseph Mall did such an amazing job portraying that character. And I was pretty sorely disappointed by Sam Hazeldine. It doesn't feel as ethereal, or I'm not sure what the word is, but he doesn't have it.
I would have to go back and compare the two because it hasn't bothered me that much. But
Okay.
So then we catch up with the stranger, who is still referred to at this point 9 episodes in as the stranger, and Nori wandering around lost in the desert where they are being watched by a mysterious masked figure. Nori encourages the stranger to use his power to help conjure up some more food for them, which he reluctantly does. This kind of backfires, but then it releases a bunch of bugs that they can eat. And it helps find their way to the lands of Rune. However, the masked figure is still watching them. I just don't care about Nori or the stranger at this moment. Just don't. The stranger, I'm so curious who he is. And if he's Gandalf, I'm going to be mad about it. But and this episode takes a turn for the worst when it comes to... Anyways. So the episode then cuts to Lindon, where Elrond approaches Círdan, a shipwright who is considered to be one of the wisest of the elves. Elrond shows him the rings and gives them to Círdan, who boards a boat before a furious Galadriel can catch up to them. This is one where I know a little bit about Círdan, and he is one of the standouts in season 2. The first thing someone might notice is he has a beard, and that's kind of unusual for elves. And so that is why I know a little bit about him. I was like, who the heck is this Círdan guy? Mm-hmm. And he's basically like one of the oldest elves there is.
Yep.
And that's why because when he first comes on screen, I'm like, this dude looks old. He's supposed to be an elf. This is terrible casting. And then I go look it up, and no, this guy is old. And he does carry that pretty well. I like that his scenes, he seems aged and wise. Yep. And I appreciated that. I like his performance. He looks good. We get him shaving his beard with like a seashell. I thought that was, I don't know why that little detail was kind of cool to me. I was like, oh, cool. But it's kind of like, how Superman would shave his beard. And it was just cool to see an elf shaving their beard. I don't know why.
Yep.
I really enjoyed that little detail. But I actually really like Círdan. I wasn't a big fan of the boat scene, of how the rings just kind of like the waves hit the boat and he dropped. Yeah. And he was like, oh, maybe I don't want to throw these in the water. Well, and then he came back with them.
Before that, are you telling me no one saw that boat leaving, like as far out as he was?
No,
that was my issue.
Also, my biggest issue with that scene, it sounds like we all had issues with that scene. Yeah. I am with Tim. I love Círdan. I'm really excited to see more of him.
He was a standout.
My big thing was he kind of like pushed back a little bit initially when Elrond was like, yeah, we have to destroy these rings. And he was like, but then we'll kind of be dooming all of Middle Earth to suffer under Sauron, won't we? And Elrond was like, yeah, probably, but if we use them, we might be compliant. And Círdan was like, oh, okay. And then he just leaves and takes like, okay, we'll go destroy him. Like,
yep.
That all happened way too fast. I'm like, ugh.
This is one of those that it goes to writing, like Bryce brought up. It was like they needed to create a moment of drama where one didn't need to exist. We didn't need to have that moment of him trying to get out there and destroy them while Elrond holds off Galadriel. We didn't need that.
Yeah, it didn't make sense.
And we also get this really great, I don't know. It's not this scene when he was shaving. That's actually later.
Yeah, it's a little later on.
And so that's when the other line
it's in episode 2 is the shaving scene.
Yeah, because I see we're about done with episode 1 here. Bryce, more to say about this? Are you good?
The boat thing kind of, that frustrated me. I was like, really? No one saw that boat leaving? Like, no one at all? Kind of weird. I agree with you. The half-foot storyline, I was talking to Caleb because we watched the first season together. I was like, that is the worst story in all of these like storylines, and it is so boring. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing against like the actors themselves, you know.
No, I think they do good, but
I mean, you know, we all know it's Gandalf, right? Like,
I
God,
will say,
please go.
the Stranger started growing on me a little bit in episode 1, and I think it's just from a baseline of he didn't really have lines in season 1. He was a giant bearded infant for like 7.5 episodes of season 1.
but why was he like so much more easier to connect with in season 1 than season 2? Because I find myself really detaching from him in season 2, and maybe it's because he's talking more, and because of that, you're seeing the writers doing writer stuff in this season that we've talked about so far. I thought he was way more. He was just it was a lot easier to connect with him and his like story, and he didn't say anything in season 1, and yet in this season, I'm really struggling to enjoy seeing him on screen at all. Like he almost acts more like a child in this one than he did in season 1, because at least with season 1 there was kind of that adventurous curiosity he brought to that character, and I thought he played it really well for the most part, even though he was part of the storyline that was my least favorite of all of them. But in this one, he's just like talking so much and saying a lot of nothing burgers. And I know we're still on episode 1, but even as the story goes on, he's just like asks a bunch of questions. And I don't know, I'm finding it hard to connect with him, which even makes the storyline more unenjoyable than it was in season 1. I don't know, maybe I'm alone in that one.
No, so I think part of what I liked about him so much in season 1 was he didn't speak. So there was this element of it was mysterious.
Yeah.
So he couldn't speak, but you also knew he was powerful. And the combination of those two, seeing this like adult infant who is not aware of what he is capable of and also cannot communicate to you, that's fairly compelling. Like that is interesting. Mm-hmm. And now he can talk. But we're not going anywhere with it.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, okay, we added dialogue to it, but we lost that mysterious element. So other than there are theories about who he is, Gandalf is the wrong theory.
Tim is going to die on this hill.
If it ends up being Gandalf, there will be many fans who have stuck around who will be upset.
Tim's going to rage quit.
I'll tell you what I told my coworker today. Don't be surprised when you're disappointed at the end of this show.
I won't be surprised at this point, man. Let me tell you, we got to get to episode 4.
My last note I'll throw out there, and it's more of just a nitpick for me. Those rings look cheap and goofy, honestly.
I thought the same thing.
I don't like them at all.
I Googled Peter Jackson's just to compare. And man, Peter Jackson's looks so much better.
Like this is the best. It literally looks like a straight up a wedding or a ring that some couple on their 20th anniversary, like the husband will buy for his wife. Like just this huge diamond. It's like
it's just like a band with a big gem in it.
Exactly.
There aren't like subtle intricacies or anything.
No,
there's
nothing else we can do. I don't know.
There was more intricacy in the ring that Aragorn wore.
The Ring of Barahir was more impressive than any of those.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway. Gil-galad writes a note for Celebrimbor about Halbrand's true identity to be sent with haste. The elves then mourn the falling leaves in the dying light of their great tree, with Gil-galad telling them that their days in Middle-earth are ended. However, Círdan approaches with the rings, much to Elrond's dismay, whose scream leads Gil-galad to drop them. And it just rolls to Galadriel's feet, and she picks one up and puts it on. Gil-galad and Círdan do the same thing, and that's how we decide who gets the 3 rings. A happy accident.
Wow, how convenient.
And all of a sudden, the light in their tree is restored. The light in the tree, I thought that was a pretty cool, beautiful scene. Again, this is one of those things that just like...
Things happen, man.
We got
5 seasons. Let's get this thing going.
Yep. So that's my complaint about it. Other than I already made the remark about the rings just magically falling to their owners. The episode ends with Celebrimbor looking at his new forge, which is pretty cool, saying he hopes the rings worked, so he has a chance to use it. A messenger then arrives from the Southlands wanting to negotiate, and yes, you guessed it, it's Halbrand.
Dun dun dun.
Episode 1.
Womp womp.
So, other than, in general, at this point, in the show. I do think this is a step up from season 1. I do think this is an improvement. I actually, like I said, I kind of like the retcon of Halbrand possibly being a good guy, and now we know he's just a sneaky little bugger. Like, I like that. I think that's an improvement. However, I still feel like I'm getting the Cliff Notes version. That's not like, yeah, in the Silmarillion, this book takes years. This story takes years. And we're getting it done pretty quickly. So I can be forgiving of that if it made more sense, other than like the rings magically falling to the person that's going to wear them. Things like that are, or like we said, the added moment of tension of Círdan taking him out on a boat and then immediately returning with him doesn't need to happen. I would almost rather have a well-written conversation about it at this point than some fake drama. So that's where I'm at feeling after episode 1. I think it's a step up from season 1. And I'm curious. I don't think... it's hard to do this, but I gotta say, the writing on Game of Thrones is so sharp that I do notice it watching this. Like, the way Game of Thrones can get away with an episode that is almost 90% dialogue, it's glaring when you come to watch something like this. Because
guess what show me and Megan are watching right now as I'm trying to watch these?
House of the Dragon?
No, Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's my first time, so.
Oh, okay.
I think we are all on the same page that our biggest and most consistent complaints with this show are a direct result of poor writing.
Okay. So, and I'm going to save my main complaint till we get to episode 4, because that one, I'm going to wait.
40 minutes in. Here we go.
Yeah. But at this point, even on the first one, I'm starting, like, they try to write like Tolkien. And just comes off as if they asked ChatGPT to write like Tolkien.
Okay, that's,
it's missing. It's missing the beauty and the weight that Tolkien put behind his writing.
I kind of felt like they stopped trying in season 2.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Because there are times where there are interactions where, like, that is a really modern interaction. They use phrases.
Oh my gosh!
Like, there's one point where they are looking out. The stranger and the 2 Harfoots are looking out over the desert in Rune, and it's like, oh, we can cut our travel time in half if we take this route. And they walk over, and he's like, well, I
Middle Earth map says.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to take the route where we run out of water on day 1 and die day 2. Or is that just me? Is that just me is a, like, 21st century phrase.
Yes.
So the fact that you have someone say that, I know you're trying to make this guy, like, kind of jokey and light and, like, not super serious. But, like, you just have given up at this point of trying to sound like Tolkien's writing.
Yep.
That's fair. The line Bryce brought up from Gil-galad is when it stands out to me that they're trying, because it comes across as clumsy. Or I'll notice they use a lot of words that we recognize from Tolkien's writing, and it just feels forced into that moment. And I'm like,
big time.
Yep,
man,
exactly.
You're missing it.
So those metaphors, man.
On to episode 2. It starts with Galadriel having a vision of Celebrimbor approaching her about a visitor he's had. But the roots of the trees attack the pair. The shaken Galadriel shares with Gil-galad her visions and fears over Sauron. This is... Did I say Elrond or Celebrimbor?
Celebrimbor.
Is that how episode 2 opens?
I thought it opened with Khazad-dûm.
I would tell you, but in my notes here, I put down eating while watching the beginning, so I clearly did not take any notes for the beginning.
No,
So
I
I
think
thought
it
the
did
opening
open.
scene of episode 2 is like it pans into Khazad-dûm and shows the
was a
mirror
really cool
system that they
mirror
have
system.
set up.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
I thought that was a great sequence. Like
Yep.
that looked really good.
I thought that was cool. And then that's right, because we get Disa and Durin talking about how he's no longer a prince and they're kind of broke and we can't afford to eat quite like we used to. And then is this the same moment that the earthquake happens?
Yes.
So the earthquake is a ripple effect of the volcanic eruption from Mordor.
Yep.
It doesn't clearly state that in the show. It is, but it had effects on Middle Earth. So
well, it does. Like
it does.
I'm pretty sure Narvi, who's the delve master, explains to like right before the Stone Singers do their thing, which we will get to, and I'm excited to talk about that. Right before that happens, he's explaining to the king like several weeks ago, Fire Mountain erupted and it has shaken through the earth, and that's what's causing these. So he does specifically say that that's what caused it.
Okay. Yeah. So it opens with Khazad-dûm. Durin is kind of refusing to reconcile with his father and over the choice to help Elrond mine for the Mithril from season 1. And Disa also realizes that her ability to sing to the mountains cannot help them and convinces the two Durins to talk. So then we get to Galadriel having her vision of Celebrimbor approaching her. And it's not clear at first that this is a vision, but then it quickly becomes clear. About the visitor, the roots of the trees attack her, shaking Galadriel shares with Gil-galad her vision and fears over Sauron. And I hate dream sequences, and this didn't do it for me. So this is just
I did. So we've pooped on the writing quite a bit to this point. I'm going to share a positive bit of writing that I found in this sequence.
I want to poop on it in this sequence. So let's hope you're not saying the same line I'm thinking.
It might be a different thing. So Galadriel and Gil-galad are talking back and forth about like, hey, these rings, maybe they're cool. But I think I need to go because of this vision. I think I need to go to Eregion and check in on Celebrimbor. And Gil-galad's like, I don't think that's such a good idea because like Sauron gained your trust and now he might have control over you. And Galadriel's like, nah, it'll probably be fine. And then there's a quick exchange where Gil-galad is like, this isn't a good idea. You were friends with him. And Galadriel goes, Halbrand wasn't. And he goes, Sauron. It's like, ooh, that was good. Because like she slipped into exactly what he was saying. And I thought that was a really impactful moment and a great bit of writing.
I'll give you, yep, that one was good. I thought in that dream sequence, I hated how Celebrimbor started quoting the poem of the rings.
Yes.
Thousands of years before, before Lord of the Rings, he's quoting something before it exists in universe.
Right. Like they haven't made 7 rings for the Dwarf Lords. They haven't made 9 rings for mortal men. They haven't even talked about making the 9 yet.
No, and they made them.
Maybe started talking about making the 7 at this point, but like for him to quote that, which is like a prophecy that hasn't even been made yet. Yeah, that was no bueno.
And they made it. Also, they made the rings out of order. For anybody who doesn't know that, don't the Elvish rings come last?
Yes.
Yeah. Which, if they had done that, what he said would make sense. But the show chose not to, and then chose to put a member berry in there of, hey, remember this? Yep. And then we're just like, yeah, now I'm mad at you. Anyway. So Celebrimbor sends a messenger to Halbrand asking him to leave, which I thought was interesting because he never got the note.
Yes, but in episode 8 of season 1, Galadriel, when she comes back, like she walks in after her and Halbrand have their big thing, and Celebrimbor says, "Where's Lord Halbrand?" And she says, "He's gone. I doubt we'll ever see him again, but if we do, none of us are to treat with him again."
Gotcha. Okay.
And so that was the callback to Galadriel said that he wasn't supposed to treat with Halbrand if he ever saw him again.
Okay. So he asks Halbrand to leave. Halbrand refuses to do so, standing there in the rain with his horse. Later, in high spirits, as he has made Ithilden, a metal forged from a last slither of mithril, Celebrimbor then lets Halbrand Sauron in as it's raining, and he feels bad. He then shares with the Master Smith that the rings worked wonders. Here, Sauron plays his ace card, unleashing a new disguise, presenting himself as Lord of Gifts, Anatar. Saying he's been sent to help the elves, Celebrimbor kneels before him as Anatar says, "Our work begins now." So this is again one of those scenes where a lot of what's happening I don't necessarily have a problem with. It's just how it's happening. We're getting there so quickly. Quickly. And I do think the forged reveal is kind of cool. It's a little cheesy, but it's also like, all right, I'm not super mad about it.
I think there's been a handful of like big moments that have happened on this show that they have done really, really well. In season 1, I thought the whole interaction between Halbrand and Galadriel in episode 8 was really, really well done. Yes. How like he transports her and now she's talking to her brother and now they're back on the boat, and like that sequence was really, really well done. I felt similarly to the Anatar revelation sequence where like there were elements of sound that were utilized to great effect. There were elements of light. The visuals were really on point. The dialogue I thought was good for them. Like, so if there's one thing that this show has done pretty well, they've done very well pretty consistently, I guess is a better way of saying it, is like big moments they are good with sequencing. Yeah.
The only real issue, other than this seems to happen really fast in the show, is the way they kind of repeat the Lord of Gifts line twice.
Yes, I thought the same thing.
Like, Anatar himself says it, and he says it in, like, Bringer of Gifts.
Yes.
And then Celebrimbor repeats
and then
it.
He says his name. He's like, Giver of Gifts.
Yeah.
Anatar. And then Celebrimbor immediately says, Lord of Gifts. It's almost like he's correcting him.
Yeah, that was really weird. That part's weird. Other than that, like, it's almost like, man, you just should, if you had just clipped Halbrand Anatar saying it, it would have flowed fine. Instead, we got a really clumsy, weird moment.
The other thing I'll say about that sequence is
Celebrimbor's infatuated.
They're doing a really, really good job early on in this season of establishing Sauron the Deceiver.
Yes.
Like the way they show him manipulating Celebrimbor, like feeling him out, figuring out what he wants, and then pitching things to him in a way that he thinks it's his idea. That has been very well done so far. So at this point, my only complaint about it again is just how quickly it all seems to happen. But like you said, like Celebrimbor is invested in this toxic relationship with this man who just walked out of his forge, and he's fully believing whatever this guy's lying to him about. And it just happens pretty quick. But other than that, this has become this, and Elrond and Galadriel are the two storylines that I am most invested in. So those are the two that I'm watching to play out, and I'm wishing none of the others existed. Meanwhile, the messenger that the elves sent to Celebrimbor is killed. We don't exactly see who kills him. We just see bodies get dragged away in chains, right? Yep.
Mm-hmm. So, whilst the elves don't know this, Galadriel is concerned about a lack of response from Celebrimbor. She asks Elrond to come with her on a journey to Eregion, but he refuses. Elrond meets once again with Círdan, who says he's wise to fear the rings, but shouldn't be blinded by the fact that they can help Middle-earth too. This is when I get the line that, to put it in modern day terminology, it's one that I've spouted for years: separate the artist from the art.
Yeah.
And I loved the way he does this, and he mentioned some Elvish artists. It's like he was
bro. Every giant nerd like me, when he was like, "Oh, don't even ask me if Dairon," I was like, yes, that is such a great deep cut. I was 100% the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, like the.
Yep.
Yeah, that was totally me when he said that. That was a fantastic line. The whole scene, I was like, Círdan is just awesome. Like, I love this dude. Like, yeah, that was fantastic, and there was some good drops in there.
No, that whole scene is one of the standouts so far. So at this point, recording, we've seen all 4 episodes. We're going back and talking about each. That scene is still one of the standouts for me. I really like this scene and this exchange because it shows Círdan bringing that thousands of years of wisdom into this scenario. And I thought this was one of the moments that the writing did a good job. I liked this scene.
Yep.
So he then joins Galadriel, or Elrond then joins Galadriel on her journey, but Gil-galad says that Elrond is leading the charge, not her. We cut then to...
Oh, one thing.
Yep.
I'm with you. I like Elrond overall in this series so far. I did not like him in the scene where Galadriel first goes to talk to him and he's like doing some woodworking or something.
Just
like,
building this magnificent boat.
Yeah. That was like just sad boy pouty Elrond, and I did not think that was a good look for him.
So I didn't have that much of a problem with it because if we're going... I mean, we got to suspend some of the book at this point, but also they're 1,000-ish years old. And they have a very long friendship. And he advised her against every course that she has taken so far.
True.
And he's feeling a little bit betrayed while also still trying to be a friend. And so I didn't have... It was a little bit sad boy, but I was like, I kind of get it. Like, you two have this long, deep-seated friendship, and you're watching her make choices you don't agree with. And you kind of get that back and forth. And I was okay with it. Again, it's not one of the scenes where they were brilliant, but I get what you were saying.
Yeah.
So then we cut to the stranger. Mysterious masked figure who's watching the strangers meets with Ciarán Hinds, the actor who plays the stranger. No, Ciarán Hinds plays the Dark Wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we meet the new Dark Wizard. They tell him that they not only have found the stranger, but that they can capture him too. However, they are unsuccessful in their first attempt because we discover that not just were these masked figures following them, but so was Poppy. Poppy, who we thought we left behind, is actually, I think she shows up at the end of episode 1. I don't even remember. But I was...
Yeah, I don't remember.
Maybe it was the beginning of episode 2.
Yeah, I don't recall. Regardless, she shows back up.
Yeah, and either way, I don't care. Poppy Proudfellow shows up and they travel through the desert, and it's just, dang it, why is Poppy here? And then we get, the stranger discovers a staff similar to the one in his dream, and he tries to do this, like, is this the tornado? Yeah.
Yes.
He tries to create a tornado to get the masked figures to go away, but it also succeeds in sending Poppy and Nori far away. The bad news is we see them again. But yeah, so he fumbles. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm letting my true feelings out. The staff breaks. He can't use his magic quite the way he hoped. And that's kind of the end of that scene. And then meanwhile, we go back to Khazad-dûm. We're racing through episode 2.
I will say my one comment on that scene is the stranger not being able to control his powers is getting old at this point. Like, That was kind of the thing throughout all of season 1, and now here we are a couple episodes into season 2, and it's like, oh, he's going to use magic again. Oh, he can't control it again. Oh, he hurt the only people that he knows and loves again. Oh, ugh. Can we get something else, please?
In the previous episode, he couldn't use his magic to get food. In this episode, he can't use his magic to protect them. But in the writer's room, they're going, yeah, but this time, he's going to have a staff.
Right.
He had a staff, but it's going to break
the last one.
Yeah, we're adding in that element there.
Also, that sequence was some of the worst CGI in the show so far.
That scene
looks really, really bad.
I have no love for this storyline at all in episode 2. None whatsoever. I'm totally, by the end of episode 2, I never want to see Nori and Poppy. And it's not against the actors. I think they do a good job. I actually like the two of them, and I like them in season 1. At this point, I don't care for any of it. So I'm more interested in who this dark wizard is at this moment, because we're probably going to get answers about that a heck of a lot faster than we are about the stranger.
Yeah.
So that's my frustration at this point. So then meanwhile in Khazad-dûm, the place is falling apart, collapsing, the sun shafts, the dwarves are losing the ability to grow their crops. Disa asks the king's approval to find the light, but they are struggling to uncover it. The episode ends with Durin receiving an invitation from Celebrimbor to visit Eregion.
I love the Stone Singers.
Really?
In episode 1 and in episode 2, there is at least one scene where there's like just guttural, passionate bellowing of musical song, and like it's harmonized well, and I just really, really like the Stone Singers.
I could take him or leave him.
I do not like them at all in this episode.
Yeah, it's quirky to me. It's one of those things that, like, I don't really have a problem with it because of the way Tolkien set up Middle Earth. I'm like, I'm not going to say it makes sense, but I'm not going to say it doesn't. I don't know. Is there any deep lore about stone singers and dwarves?
There's not. The only thing that I would say is Tolkien goes out of his way to emphasize like everything is alive in Middle Earth.
Yes.
The trees are alive, the mountains are alive, the hills are alive with the sound of music. So it makes sense to me that a people that have a deep, like the elves can talk to trees because they have a deep, almost supernatural connection to trees. It makes sense to me that dwarves would be able to talk to the mountains because they have a very similar, deep, going back thousands of years connection to the mountains.
Yes, and that's why I don't really have a problem with it. I'm just not sure, like, I love it quite as much.
It's not the idea that's bad. It's again, it goes back to what Tim was saying, that it's another moment that should be a little bit more dramatic than what they've executed it to be. Because in one scene, she's saying, "We have an idea," and then it just cuts right to them going straight to the ledge and just singing like right away, and it lasts all of what, like 10 seconds, basically. Like,
yeah, it's pretty quick.
This is a big deal, and this is like the second biggest issue, besides the fact that the father and son are bickering like little children when their entire race is at risk here.
They're two of my favorites. This isn't even the biggest
issue I have with this storyline either. But like, I agree. Like, I wouldn't have cared so much about the idea behind it, because that what you said makes sense. Like, yeah, everything is living and breathing, so it wouldn't make sense to have that connection. But it's like this really rushed 10-second singing. It's like just after a random edit and cut that felt really out of place after they were like standing in one room. And then the very next cut, they're like at the edge of their, like, it just didn't flow well at all. And it just kind of felt like this awkward moment of just like screaming at some rocks and then they're done. Even though it sounded good. It did sound good. I'll give you that.
Well, screw you guys. I like it.
Okay.
No, I didn't say it.
All right.
I just don't care for it. I do like the idea. Like you said, it would make sense that the dwarves... Also, when I think of... The dwarves are always singing in The Hobbit.
They do have a lot of songs.
Yeah, and I mean, Tolkien has a lot of songs. Everybody's always singing.
So many songs.
So I think that is part of one of the things that makes this world so rich. So I don't really have a problem with it. It's just they haven't used it in a way that I find super fascinating.
You have not found that they've used it to good effect.
Right. Yep. So that's where we are. That is episodes 1 and 2. And so far, again, like I said with episode 1, I do think the first 2 episodes are an improvement over season 1. I'm curious to see where we're going. I feel like it's rushed. I feel like it's moving along really quick. There are a lot of times that I wish... One of the reasons why I wish the stranger, Nori, and Poppy were gone were so that these other moments that are supposed to be big had time to be fleshed out. If we took the 20 minutes that we spent with Nori and Poppy wandering the desert talking about water and then a tornado, get that out of there, and then we can actually have more time with Anatar and Celebrimbor. We can have more time with Durin and Disa and figuring out this stone singing thing to bring back the light. We can make these other moments better if we took out some of the fan fiction that's happening with Nori. Sorry. At this point, especially if this is Gandalf, that whole storyline is just fan fiction of what somebody would like. You know what we haven't seen in Lord of the Rings? Desert. Let's put Gandalf in the desert with some hobbits. It's going to be good. And I'm like, no, I'm not here for that right now. So they're not making that story worth my time.
Here's the only thing I'm going to push back on. I have a brother that has a similar take to you. He isn't even watching season 2 because he's like, it's basically fan fiction. Well, it's kind of all fan fiction, though. Like, it depends on how you define fan fiction, but like, there is very, very, very little writing about Durin the Fourth. Like, very little.
Yeah.
Disa is a completely made up character.
Completely made up. Yep.
There is not a whole lot written about Gil-galad. Like, basically, everything in the show is fan fiction. I mean, there are certain players that existed, there are certain events that existed, but the vast majority of the storylines taking place, as I mentioned when talking about season 1, are made up.
Yeah.
So that's the tricky part of, like, you have to temper expectations with fan fiction, or it's tricky to say, like, oh, I don't like this fan fiction, but I like this fan fiction. Like, it's all fan fiction.
That's true. That's fair. But here's where I'm coming at it as fan fiction is there's the fan fiction that feels like it's trying to flesh out the story that Tolkien wrote. Okay. So the Anatar, Celebrimbor stuff, that feels like it's trying to flesh that out and stay fairly true, making some changes. Even, the Peter Jackson movies take quite a few liberties with the story, but they tried to stay faithful to the core. The problem I'm getting here with fan fiction is it feels like what I said, where somebody sat down and says, you know what would be cool? Hobbits and a wizard in the desert. And they're not really justifying it yet. They're not really telling me why yet. We might get there. I might come back and be like, you know what? I appreciate it. At this point, I'm like,
with the benefit of hindsight, yeah.
Yes. But right now, I'm like, why are we doing that? Why are we having a sandstorm that separates people other than, like, you know what would be cool? Let's do this. Like, it feels like that kind of fan fiction, other than the kind that is trying to be something loyal and faithful. So that's just the Nori Poppy storyline for me. And yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like, it is all fan fiction because basically what we have to go on is a history textbook. So
we don't even have that. We have the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, which is you used the word Cliff Notes earlier. Like, it's essentially a Cliff Notes version of the history of Middle Earth.
Yeah, because
Like,
they
it's
don't
not
even
even
have
like
rights.
they can't use the Silmarillion. They can't
Yeah.
use the Lost Tales of Numenor.
They don't have the
use
rights.
anything other than the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, and that's
Which-
all they have to go on.
What you just said is the only reason I'm still here.
Yeah.
Because I know that they are working with a very limited toolbox, and
Right.
I love the world that Tolkien created. So even though I'm being critical of the show, I enjoy weekly coming to Middle Earth to see what's here.
It's fun to have new content from this world.
And none of it so far has been so... None of it has been what the Acolyte was to Star Wars. You know,
Right.
None of it has been that yet. So I'm still here. I'm still having fun. But there is some glaring issues. Like, I'm just not caring. I remember texting you at the end of season 1 that we have spent, at this point, counting season 1, 8 one-hour-ish episodes, 2 episodes into season 2, we have spent about 10 hours with these characters.
Yep.
And I care less about every single one of them than I did at the end of 3 hours in Fellowship of the Ring. And I think that's a writing issue.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a writing issue. So that's where I'm at. 10 hours later, I should care about Nori and Poppy, and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm at on the first 2 episodes. Only 10 minutes over what we hope to be. Any other thoughts? Or are we diving into episode 3 and 4?
Before we jump into the next category, I want to tell you a little bit about Zencastr. When I was preparing for our 13 Nights of Halloween series, I was really searching for a way to streamline the process. I wanted a professional-looking setup to invite our guests to. I wanted quality audio and video recording, and I wanted the easiest way to release the episodes to as broad of an audience as possible. This is how I landed on Zencastr. It is now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Just log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio-quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. And speaking of audio quality, have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with the click of a button. So if you're thinking of starting your own podcast or just want to streamline what you are already doing, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code AVERAGECUSTOMER, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. That's average customer, one word. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all of my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
And now we return you to our regular scheduled program, In Progress.
F you.